Hi, welcome to another episode of the Whole Note Podcast. My name is Shin-Young Kim, and today we will be joined by the Balourdet Quartet. The quartet consists of violinists Angela and Justin, violist Ben, and cellist Russell. The Balourdet Quartet was recently a recipient of the 2024 Avery Fisher Career Grant. Other prizes include prizes at the Banff International String Quartet Competition and first prize at the Fishoff National Chamber Music Competition. We sat down as they shared with us a little bit of their early years and how they became a group, forming at the Rice University Shepherd School of Music. They also shared with us their strategy of how they go about programming various concerts. Finally, they gave us a peek into their work as the Graduate String Quartet in residence at the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music, where they currently study with the renowned Pacifica Quartet. Thank you again for tuning in to today's episode. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We hope you enjoy. Thanks. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So for our non-YouTube audience, can you guys individually go around and introduce yourselves a little bit and share with us your name and your instrument?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Bay, and I play the violin. I guess my hometown is Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm Justin. I also play the violin, and I'm from New Jersey.
Hi, I'm Ben, and I play the viola, and I'm from Houston, Texas.
My name is Russell, and I play the cello, and I'm from Dallas, Texas.
All right, thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk with you guys about your work as a quartet. But before we get into that, one of the first things I always wonder when I encounter a chamber group is just the origins of their name. So can you guys share with us how you came to be the Balourdet Quartet?
It's a good story.
Yeah, so three of us, Angela, Justin, and I, met at the Taos School of Music in the summer of 2018, and we really were inspired by, I guess, the spirit of chamber music and like sort of the family kind of thing that we all had going on there. For those that don't know, it's like a very small chamber music festival in Taos, New Mexico. There's like 19 people, and you get to know each other super, super well over 8 weeks. And so, kind of coming out of that, we really wanted to sort of be continuing that exciting spirit of chamber music making. And Justin and Ben had actually played in a group together in the past and knew each other. And we all knew we'd be at the Shepherd School of Music in the fall of 2018. And so, basically, when it came time to apply to our first summer music festival together as a quartet, at the Aspen Music Festival, we're throwing around all these names, and we really, really wanted to honor somehow the Taos School of Music and sort of the way that we'd met and pay homage to that. So one day I was just like searching through old stuff, and I found the business card of the chef who actually made this amazing French food that they had at the hotel that the festival was held at, the Hotel St. Bernard, and his name's Antoine Balourdet. And so we decided to name it that, and it's sort of over the years, I think it's really grown to like really represent a lot of things about us, and including like how much we love food and how much we sort of bond over sharing meals together.
Yeah.
And he was sort of like a little bit of he was a bit of a character in the town, and he had a great sense of humor, and he was sort of always causing trouble in various ways.
All positive.
All positive.
All positive, yeah.
But yeah, we decided to name it after him.
Cool. I'm curious. Obviously, I think food is such an essential part of any chamber group. What do you guys like to do outside of just having good food together as a group?
That's a really hard question because it's such a vital part of our group.
Sure.
Recently, we've been exploring a lot of wings together, a lot of chicken wings. Pizza is always there. But outside of food, we have done laser tags together.
Nice.
We spent like an evening playing a couple like arcade games at a laser tag place across from Russell's apartment here in Bloomington. What other things do we do?
We hang out.
I mean, we hang out like no. I just wanted to share like
watch
detail.
the boys together.
We watch a lot of movies together. In the
Oh, okay.
beginning of like the very early on when we didn't have lots of concerts. Sometimes we just like show up to rehearse, and then end up watching Shrek.
Oh,
Shrek is like a big part of our movie choices.
Sure.
We watched The Boys, which is a show on Amazon.
okay.
We watched that last 2 summers ago. Like we binge watched it together over the summer.
Mm.
Yeah, we have a lot of shared activities. Our Instagram is full of like reels that we share.
Yeah.
Very busy. Yeah, maybe more active than our like Facebook Messenger group chat.
Yeah, no, I saw one of your guys' reels. It was like you guys were at Mother Bears or something, right? Or you guys were having pizza together as a group. So
Yeah,
I
we
remember.
bought Mother Bears, and it was actually shot in this room. This is our rehearsal
Oh.
space at the
Mhm.
Jacob School. And we were like, there's like a trending reel of like, hey, we're a string quartet, of course and then we just kind of joked around and said it was an excuse to get pizza once again. Because we were really hungry and we were like, we should post something on Instagram, like really fun.
Right.
And then it turned into like, let's get pizza.
Yeah.
And then the video was really easy to shoot. And it really did well on Instagram, so I think people related to that content quite a bit, which is
Yeah.
a bonus.
We didn't break any Jacob School rules bringing the pizza.
Right.
I don't think you guys ever need an excuse to have pizza. It's an
Thank you.
essential. Cool. So, moving forward, so three of you guys met at Taos before starting at Rice, but talk to us a little bit more about like the genesis of the group and how you guys came together, the four of you guys, as a quartet at Rice.
Sure. Well, Russell and I actually went to Taos 2 consecutive summers together, and we were in our very first chamber group. We played Verklärte Nacht by Schoenberg in our very first experience playing together, and that was very memorable. We also worked with one of our later on primary coaches at NEC, Nicholas Kitchen. He was a real role model for us, and especially in the study of Beethoven manuscripts and kind of the whole grammar of music. So that was a fantastic experience. Angela joined us the next summer, and Russell and Angela played the Debussy Quartet, which is a piece that we ended up touring with a lot as the Balourdet Quartet. So that was a fortuitous experience as well. And when I first met Ben in another chamber experience, I remember having this sensation of, there's not like a lot of people that I've played with that have like a similar like physical build to me when playing, and sitting down playing inner voices with Ben, I felt like I was looking at a mirror of myself. We had very different very different technique, but there was this, I remember this like instant bond of, wow, I want to play with this guy. Same with playing with Russell and the Verklärte Nacht and Angela. We had read at Taos, thanks to Antoine Ballardet's late night social activity, but we didn't actually play together until the very first notes of playing together at Rice, when we sat down to read Opus 127 by Beethoven. And I remember just also being ecstatic that there was this feeling that the spirit of music making at Taos was going to last all school year, and little did we know that 6 years later, here we are doing the same thing 8-9 hours a day together, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, and so when you guys met at Rice as a group, was it for like a chamber music credit, or were you guys reading just for fun kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like we kind of duped Angela into being in the group because it was supposed to be a school credit. She had stuff lined up, and we kind of, am I right? Like it was supposed to be that we weren't gonna do a lot. That it was going to be like an easy hangout.
It was a let's hang out together.
Let's hang out.
You don't have to.
Yeah. So it was supposed to be like, let's just hang out. But those hangouts turned out to be like 4-hour sessions after like orchestra and like doing kind of excessive amounts of rehearsing and just like figuring things out that were kind of like seemingly probably a waste of time to the people around us, like our teachers and faculty. As Russell and I went to Rice with the intention of like starting to take orchestra auditions. We were actually doing our second master's degree. I had been in New York. I did the orchestra program at MSM. and hadn't taken really any auditions during that time. So I went to Rice kind of living at home and thinking like, oh, now I'm going to get an orchestra job. And like the group kind of just like forms, and we're like irresponsibly hanging out kind of like at all hours of the night, like rehearsing chamber music and just having a really good time getting to know each other. I think it's like part of why the kind of like Taos vibe and kind of like why us being named after Antoine is so fitting, because like we really do have that spirit in us of like wanting to hang out. The sharing of meals and just like having a good time is really kind of what brought us together and like allowed us to have these amazing discussions we have in rehearsal.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, I mean, you guys seem to really credit the Taos Music Festival as such a huge part of your foundation as a group. For listeners that may not know, can you talk a little bit about what the festival is and what that's like being at Taos?
Yeah, so Taos is 8 weeks long, and basically the structure is every 2 weeks you get a new piece and a new group. So you have about 10 days to rehearse a piece, and then you get a dress rehearsal on like a Thursday, and then you perform either on Saturday or Sunday, and then you do that again. So you get to play four really, you get to study four really intensely, really great chamber music works. And I played a piano trio and I think 3 string quartets. And everybody gets mixed up pretty evenly. And you get to play with different people. And, you know, like the coachings are amazing. The year I went, it was the Borromeo Quartet for a month.
Yeah.
And then we got the Miro Quartet and the Brentano Quartet for 2 weeks. So those guys just sit there and basically teach you how to rehearse. So the coachings turn into like, you know, they all have time and they all love chamber music and string quartet. So they sit there just discussing how to read the quartet score, how they approach intonation, how they approach, you know, bowings, how they approach harmony, like blah, blah, blah. And then the meals there were incredible. Unfortunately, the chalet that used to be held at for maybe over 50, 60 years, it got torn down last summer because the owner unfortunately passed away, and now Taos School of Music is going through a little bit of change. But while we were there was awesome food. So we'd be waking up with like cowbells and we'd like have breakfast and we'd go like practice for an hour, or every group does it differently. Practice or like meet at 9 a.m. and then get a coaching at 11 a.m., lunch at 1 p.m., you know, chill for a little bit, more rehearsal, more, you know, more food. And then by 10 p.m., everyone starts coming out to the dining room, you know, to read, or to play some drinking games, to play some cards. And like Russell said, it was like 19 people. So you just get to know each other so well. In a ski valley during the summer, no one's around. So we get driven to like the town, which is like half an hour away, like to do your laundry every 2 weeks, to go like grocery shopping a little bit. But it's it's a really special place. And I like to think that we're definitely living the extension of it somehow.
Well, that's great. So you guys kind of already hinted at this a little bit, but for listeners that might not know, Rice is notorious for being an intensive orchestral program. And Russell and Ben, I believe you guys kind of mentioned how you came into Rice with the intention of going for orchestra. For the other two, was that the same for you guys? And also, how was managing or juggling the orchestra rehearsals on top of the intense hours that I'm sure you guys were putting in as a quartet?
For me, I guess I'm the only undergraduate three from this group from Rice, so I went there for 4 years. I really went there wanting to study with Paul Cantor. And orchestra, we had orchestra 3 times a week for like 2.5 hours. And Larry Ratcliffe, we miss him a lot. And his way of rehearsing actually did influence our quartet quite a bit. He knew everyone's name. He knew everyone's, you know, like every little detail about you. And he just made you feel very much like family. So Rice had a really nice like community. So even in orchestra rehearsal, you might be surrounded by 100 other people, but you were showing up really committed to the music and really having to perform at the highest level. So it never, I don't think I saw it as like an orchestra training program, especially because I was still like 18, 19, but
Sure.
as like an opportunity to learn pieces correctly, basically, because Larry has such a detailed way of looking at the score.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. I wasn't really into the orchestra thing as a career, but Larry Ratcliffe was a huge draw for me and for the school, as well as the amazing faculty. But what Larry stood for, and very sadly, he passed away 2 summers ago,
Right.
was a deep commitment to music as more than just a job. Because a lot of people, rightfully so, everybody wants to be employed in music. It's very uncertain, and Rice does an amazing job kind of advancing people's careers. But Larry made you put a little bit of a pause on thinking of music that way, and really thinking of it as a full commitment of your whole soul and really your whole purpose of living, and being a good human being and a committed human being as well as a musician. And that's what made Rice Orchestra probably the top conservatory orchestra in the country.
Yeah.
And it was that commitment that made it greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's what makes amazing quartet playing too, is that you could, in theory, have the 4 best instrumentalists in the world, but if you don't have that kind of commitment to each other and the music and what you stand for, your why, we talk about a lot, it's not going to be a quartet.
Right.
I mean, even kind of to bounce off of that, there's a sense of like, by doing orchestra every day, you get really used to kind of even the way we rehearse, which is we rehearse a lot, but I think we're okay with the hours because we got so used to it at school.
Yeah.
And there's something to like that regular orchestra rehearsal. It might seem annoying like the first month you're there, but eventually it's just like a class, and it's like it's really not that hard. I mean, sometimes you play rep where like you might be like a little tired afterwards, but like you take your dinner break and then you go to quartet rehearsal or you do your homework and you practice. Like I think that's actually like the best training for kind of the professional life, because you would be doing probably a very similar amount of rehearsing or playing at least per week. And I think that's actually very helpful to anyone kind of aspiring to get a job, is like you need that regularity of like, how are you going to show up prepared? And if you're going to be prepared, I mean, like, come on, we were like not prepared half the time in orchestra, but like it taught us, like, it reminds you, it's like we were talking about that this week, even with business meetings we have, having those regular rehearsals reminds you, like, I need to show up prepared. Oh, I forgot to practice that part again. By like to time, because like Rice has so many rehearsals. It was like what, like 11, 15 rehearsals for a concert. So like by the time you get to that like concert, like you know the piece back and forth, and like that's why it sounds so good. And like Larry's kind of walked you through how the piece goes, and like that's a large part of your training there. And it kind of teaches us style of discipline that doesn't really exist at a lot of other schools.
Yeah.
I think one of the most inspiring things about Larry as like a quartet player was that you would have these 15 rehearsals, but Larry was like, if you knew what he was doing like behind the scenes, he was always score studying and like always trying to find more even throughout all of this. Because I think it's really it could be really easy to kind of just, after 15 or so rehearsals, just kind of be like riding the wave and just like kind of chilling. But like he was kind of always pushing us to like find more in the music. And I think, as a quartet player, the whole thing is kind of always diving deeper into the music. And, you have so many concerts of the same rep. And like, there's a lot of joy in the process of like discovering something new about it in every single performance and every rehearsal, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, all of us have been in school orchestras, and for the most part, the spirit is not high, right? Everyone just kind of goes into rehearsal thinking like, oh, this is just another thing I have to do. But that's really wonderful what Larry kind of, from what you guys have shared, instilled in that program of just committing and really loving what you do. Because at the end of the day, even orchestral music is some of the greatest music that we have. And so I don't think there's room for us to just kind of take any opportunity to play a Brahms symphony or a Tchaikovsky symphony and just kind of do it lackadaisically, right? Like we should always be
giving back and giving thanks really to those great composers that shared their art with us. So that's really wonderful. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about your rehearsal process then? Like, how has that evolved over the years in terms of just like how do you guys go about rehearsing a new piece?
I think one of the techniques that we started maybe like 3-4 years ago, we don't do it as much anymore, but in the beginning we did a lot of pair runs. So we get to a point where, like the four of us, like I remember this really distinctly with Mozart Dissonance Quartet that we learned. And the four of us, we kind of read through the first movement. We kind of do like, oh, this is the development section. Let's try that again. Like maybe 1 or 2 rehearsals like that, where we kind of just like gel it together, very basics. And then once it feels like everybody kind of has a hang of their parts, of what they want to express, then we start doing pair runs of the movement. So I played first on that piece. So like, for example, Russell and I would run it through. And Justin and Ben would have their score out, and then they would listen and they would mark some stuff. And then we would, just do every pair possible, but it usually starts with the simple ones, outer voices, inner voices, and then the fun ones. I think it's like the back row, front row. I really like those because you get to like, you don't usually pay attention to that kind of stuff, I don't think. But we try to learn how to play with each other in different ways like that.
Sure.
We did a lot of like singing, of course, and like a lot of counting. Towards like a more like competition kind of route, then we would start recording ourselves and listening back together. We would have things like that. Another technique that we used to do a lot with bar talk, especially when we have like unison passages, is kind of like passing the notes. So if we have, let's say, a C major scale, then I would put like C, D, E, F, G. We would kind of like learn to like play as one. And that we noticed that like helped a lot with our unison intonation and inflection. And it just like kind of keeps your focus pretty high. Remember any other stuff that we used to do? Or now? Yeah. Early on or now? How
So I mean, kind of like our initial stages of forming kind of really taught us a lot, because like we had the pandemic came up like right as we finished at Rice, and before that we were recording for competitions, and we did like fish-off recordings, and we had done other stuff before that, and we actually got to use a lot of the resources at Rice for that. You could check out like a recording cart with high quality mics. They had a booth where you could edit and like really understand what you sounded like over speakers that sounded nice. So like a lot of how we actually ended up rehearsing like after the first year was like hearing ourselves back on recordings, and especially like with good miking, like we would go back after like a 4-hour session in like a hall that we had recorded, and like you could really go back and start to mess with acoustics. You could start to like really hear how your phrasing's working, the stuff you've rehearsed. Like, oh, that, like, you totally can't hear that gesture. Like, that makes sense why we keep getting that comment. Or, like, yeah, our vibratos sound crazy next to each other. Or, oh my God, that part's so damn out of tune. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? I'm like, you really start to hear that. I mean, like, that kind of, I think, sped up the process for us, like, quite a bit. As we do, like, a take of something. And I remember for Fish Off, we really, like, we would do, like, one movement at a time, because everyone was recording for schools, so we had like no time in halls, so we like used classrooms, and we get like an hour here and there, and you'd like spend it, you'd do like 5 takes in a row and just see what you get, and you'd hear it back, and then we'd like rehearse a little bit between takes, and like it slowly would improve that way, just based on almost no one communicating. And I think that really informed like how we viewed ourselves, the things we found important in the music, and like kind of a stronger identity individually of what we wanted to sound like in the group. And that really helped. I mean, I don't know if we can really emphasize that enough, but like recording yourself early on helps you so much more understand what coaches are hearing, what an audience is hearing. And then from there, like you start to build these tools, and you can start to have conversations very differently.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the year that you guys won Fish Off was the COVID year, so everyone had to record basically for the competition, right?
Yeah. Well, it turned out our pre-screenings, the thing I'm talking about, ended up being the entire competition. which like, so we went into it like trying to like basically submit the best thing we could just to pass pre-screening. And like, I'm sure everyone else did too. And you didn't get to record again because like everything shut down. You couldn't do it. So like that's what they got was your pre-screening. So it was like we had barely like even played 18-1 for like a month at that point. And like that was like our first real recording shot at it. And like we barely had coaching. So we went to like Robert Mann seminar and that was about it. So we had like 5 days of coachings on that and like some other stuff. So it was like kind of like a whiplash of like really learning and being specific. I guess another thing we did was like going to summer festivals. Like we did a Dover workshop in Amelia Island our first year, and Aspen we did our first year, and kind of like having that intensive time where nothing else is going on. I think really like lets you know if you're compatible. If that makes any sense, in the sense of like, can you deal with each other? Can you rehearse? And it's a lot of it's like each group does it differently. Like we rehearse a lot, some groups rehearse less and practice more, talk about different things. And like, I think it's very interesting to see like what happens when all you have to do is quartet and like what starts to form. Because every group we saw go into the Aspen program, like they always gained so much out of it because you had so many crazy kinds of coachings where like everyone's coming at you from every different direction. You might like hate some of the comments, you might love some of the comments, and it like starts to steer you into like, how do you navigate this within your own group and make choices? And for us, that was like a big thing. Even if it's like a week or two of just the quartet at a festival, it's like super important.
I think one thing that like really makes a lot of difference, and this is like at least early on, is like really being willing to spend the time just like experimenting and like trying all sorts of things that work, like just kind of going through every one of your wildest dreams. I feel like a lot of the time, like people are always looking for like an answer, but sometimes the answer is kind of in like all the spaghetti you throw on the wall and like actually finding the thing that ends up being it. Like I remember like all these like kind of goofy rehearsals of like just somehow trying to express like how much resonance you want during this one part, to like make these graphs that didn't make any sense and like draw them into our music. I think the important thing is like just always being willing to like try to take that step to like express what it is you're trying to hear, even with all like within all the recording stuff, and like just within like communicating with the rest of the group, because actually starting to talk, actually like building the tools to have these conversations like didn't start out particularly easy in a lot of ways, but like as you do it more and more, like you sort of, I guess the more information I give the group, the more information the group has from me, that I can like say almost anything and they'll understand what I mean. And like likewise for the whole group.
I think there was like a good turning point we had early on where like we still like are trying to figure out how to play in tune, and I think every musician does like their whole life. Like we had early on, like a month in, we had a moment with Russell and I where like I had studied with someone that really believed in like really high thirds and like leading tones and like a lot of things pretty high. And Russell had studied with Hans and the whole practice mind book of like low thirds. We're like sitting there like arguing, and I'm like, this one sounds so much better. Like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, no, this is it like ended with him going, you're just not a man of science. And that was like the whole conversation at the end. And it was like, I think it made both of us actually like understand we both had valid opinions in some way. And it took honestly, it took like until maybe like 3 years in to actually understand what we were both feeling, because there's like so much. I mean, like when you get into like trying to figure out intonation, you can do like the basics of like, oh, play your third low in the chord, but the second you start throwing inversions in and you start like playing dominant chords, you have all this voice leading, it gets really crazy really fast when you're starting to look at it super objectively, and you almost can like sit there like we have done like many times, like with a tuner on, and like you just like figure out, oh, this thing that sounded good actually fits all the rules, but it's like have to start to figure out how to navigate and tie things together, and there was a whole thing with that. And I think a lot of those early conversations, like we all had super strong opinions on music, and that's what made it so fun because it was all super different. And we might have been strong-headed about it at first, but like even now, those kind of like personalities coming through and us being kind of like open to say almost anything about how we feel. No one gets offended. Like if someone's telling you you're out of tune, like you're gonna want to change it. If someone's telling you you're not together with them, like you're gonna want to change it. Like you're gonna want to figure it out. So no one gets like upset. And there's always a starting point of like, rather than talking about just you're out of tune, it's like how can we play more in tune together and more musically the same gesture, or like how do we count this pulse, and all these things start to get formed and understood just through like basic having said how you're feeling and why you played the way you play, and not getting like upset over it, but like having more fun just like figuring out why, which is always fun. Which I think is what he's talking about with like throwing everything at the wall. It's like, let's see how many ways we can play this tune or this chord like in tune, or how many gestures we can do that make this like hide and joke actually work. Or like we did like a thing with like a Beethoven where we played like the first phrase of it like every way possible with dynamics and gesture and pulse. And like at the end we were just like, oh, they all kind of work. Oh. And then you just like kind of screwed at that point because like now you know everything is fine. It's all like taste and like whatever the heck you want to do.
Right. Well, and you guys kind of already hinted at this already, but you guys are obviously four individually wonderful musicians, but in a quartet, it's obviously a musical melting pot in many ways. How do you guys go about sharing your musical ideas and kind of delegating whose idea to go with? Or is it just kind of a mesh, kind of like what Russell was saying, you just kind of throw stuff and see what sticks kind of thing? Or
I think this is one of the questions that people really ask a quartet, because it seems like when you go on stage, like you're playing together, you're playing one piece, you're playing at the same time, it seems like. So you must have come to an agreement. It's basically what people imagine a quartet to be. But just to like indirectly answer that question is that like basically I think an established quartet or a quartet that's been together for a long time, what we do is like heighten the sense of spontaneity and communication that makes a space for anything and everything to be correct at that moment. So I like to use the term of like, just make it make sense. Like maybe we said non-vib and we've all been doing non-vib, but in rehearsal, if it doesn't make sense, somebody needs to question it and be like, are we doing non-vib here just because we said it a week ago? Or are we like really committed to the why behind the non-vib right now? Maybe our phrase before have developed differently in the last week, subconsciously, without even us like talking about it, that the non-vib maybe doesn't fit anymore. So should we graduate from it? It's kind of like that. But like in the moment of creating, we're all committed to that single moment, even in rehearsal. So a performance is like an exciting extension of like our journey through each piece. But we never sit there and like, so no performances ever feel like we're ready to play. Like if you don't like that every note has come to our concerts. We did, like this is, I think it's because we like basically think about every note and like how each note can and will affect the next, so that in the moment we are having to focus on the present. Rather than just doing tasks that are written all over the page. Or at least that's how we approach the process of creating, especially in a concert.
I guess like maybe a simplified way of saying is like we rehearse like almost all the options a lot of the time, but like we rehearse so that we can all be on the same page. And that way like there is the freedom to like trust in the moment. Because a lot of times we do like end up really deciding like down to like the microsecond, it feels like, and like the general of like once you do that, you can kind of just focus on character and phrasing in a more general sense, and a lot of the interactions between the parts becomes more free, I guess.
And I guess like it's never like Justin's idea was better, so let's go with that, and everybody writes something down. It's kind of like we kind of create that story and that like thought flow together, so that whenever we're playing in front of a coach, even, or whenever we're doing like let's do a run through of the first movement, we're all like in the right mindset to kind of try something new, even. When everybody feels comfortable in that like freedom and spontaneity, then like all the stuff we've rehearsed are there, but then you also see more opportunities, and that's how we continue to grow and continue to explore the same piece of music.
And I think, I mean, with really any music, spontaneity is so important because you never want to perform in a very predictable way, right? Like you don't want to go to a concert kind of knowing what to expect. You kind of want to be able to like, oh wow, that happened, kind of thing. So that's really wonderful. The other thing I really admire about you guys is just and just envy is, you know, I think for me personally, when I work on something on the cello, I oftentimes associate different phrases with like memories that I have in the past. But for you guys, I think that's, you guys always, you know, go on stage together, obviously. So like you have those memories with each other. So I'm sure that makes every performance, every phrase that much more special to be able to look over and just be like, hey, we had pizza last night, you know, and just kind of be able to enjoy that together. So I really,
I mean,
I envy.
I'm laughing because you make it sound so beautiful, but it's also like you're doing the same thing that I asked you not to do. You know what I mean?
One thing that really gets me, at least, I don't know how much the others relate to this, but like when we bring back something after a long time of having not touched it, like really remembering like where each of us was at, you know, in our personal lives, in our lives together, in little habits that you had. I had like a really weird thing with like Bartok 4, the slow movement, where like every time they'd started, you know, I just sit there and I wait and I just like remember like I just like re-see the three of them at like from like 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. It's like the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
But there's definitely like some like weird associative memory with that kind of thing. And I think that's always really fun too.
Yeah. One of the funniest experiences for us was this year we got to go back to Rice and play in Chamber Music Houston, which is the series that you know, we had gone to all the concerts of as students. So it was kind of surreal. And the presenter requested that we play a piece by Carl Nielsen that we had played for the Nielsen competition in 2019. And aside from playing two movements once in Dallas, we hadn't touched the piece since playing it in Copenhagen in the finals. So it was kind of surreal to come back to that piece and play it like in the school where we learned it and realize that we were literally like different human beings in a lot of ways. Like each of our playing had evolved so much that it was like unrecognizable. But then at the same time, we actually did default to a lot of the same like kind of habits, even if it didn't like sound the same. It was that was kind of nuts, but it was really fun too.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So moving forward a little bit, can you share with us a little bit about your game plan and your strategy for going about programming your concerts? I know oftentimes quartets will have, you know, an early Beethoven or Mozart or Haydn quartet to start, and they'll kind of lean into like more romantic like Mendelssohn or Schubert, and then end with like a 20th century, whether it be Bartok or Shostakovich. Is that something you guys kind of subscribe to, or do you guys try to think a little bit more outside that?
Well, I think for us, there's so much great quartet music that we actually basically all have the same tastes and love the same pieces because there is so much good stuff. The only hard part is eliminating stuff and then kind of coming up with a theme for a program because our management requests that each year we come up with two main programs that have themes. But in all honesty, we come up with the music we're passionate about first and then make a way to tie it together with a paragraph kind of describing it, a title and something that can really sell the program. And that begins with what we call the ender. So usually that's like a heavy hitting quartet for us by Beethoven or Schubert or Brahms, something that's for us very meaty, but full of infinite possibilities. we do tend to like to program some of the hardest pieces ever, and maybe in future seasons we'll chill a little bit with that once we get through all the repertoire. But there's so many Beethovens, especially, to go through, that's going to be a while. And then for us, after like building around the ender, once we pick that, generally we think of it a little bit like a meal, going back to food, how you have the appetizer, like you were saying, a Mozart or a Haydn is a great kind of, way to whet your palate. Although those pieces deserve credit, and it's really fun, like when you get to play Mozart as an ender too, because like then everything is like flipped. So for instance, like we also had a program recently where we played 59-1 and Schubert G major on the same program, which a lot of people would think is nuts, but those were our two enders for this season, and getting to play them in the same program was pretty surreal too. And then inevitably, you'll have collab pieces, so a lot of times the last piece will get subbed with a piano quintet or viola quintet, or sometimes a whole program of quintets, which is also really fun. Or like at Rice, we got the request to play Nielsen. Some presenters are more open to modern music than others. So generally we try to have something contemporary on the program, usually kind of the middle, like that's where we throw in the thing that the audience might not be expecting, but we want them to be blown away and want to hear more. So, and it really depends. There's still pushback from certain audiences that just are not open to it, and that's their right. But we try to, especially we've had a lot of success with our first commission piece by Karim Al-Zand through a grant from Chamber Music America. Karim is a wonderful composer and theory professor, and he incorporates a lot of older music tropes with this kind of tongue-in-cheek aspect to the music, and audiences have loved it. We've played it over 30 times across the UK and the US, and people have gone nuts for it and said it was their favorite piece on the program. Same thing at Banff competition. We played a piece by Derek Bramell called Intonations. That's like this kind of sampling of Americana, and uses the string quartet to play blues harmonica and even funk and hip hop beats in the last movement. And that piece also just like blew people's minds, and they were like, this is the favorite piece that we heard from any group in the competition. So that's what you want, is to really expand people's tastes. But we put a lot of effort into finding contemporary pieces that are both satisfying to our curiosities and that we'll be passionate about putting a lot of time into and stretch ourselves, but also people can still relate to.
I think maybe one of the things that in school, your teachers push you to like really be creative with how you program, and there's a kind of reality, especially when you're a standard rep quartet, which is kind of what we are. We like mostly are known for playing the standards, the Romantic era, maybe like through Bartok and Haydn, Mozart, like all the stuff that's like pretty normal, strict classical music. And we have all these things that we love to learn. We've played so much modern music. We probably played an equal amount of modern music to the standard rep that we've also played. But there kind of is not actually a ton of presenters that really are going to go and be down with a program that's like 90% modern music. And I think one of the struggles we've had kind of coming out of school and being professional musicians touring is, how do we curate a program so that not only does a presenter want it, but like an audience wants to be there, and there's a story or a kind of not an event out of it, but an experience that people want to go see. And you see it a lot with younger groups nowadays, including us. Like, we're constantly working to really frame these programs and make them something that where you can't really switch out pieces. Like, the presenter's going to want it no matter what. And I think our first 2 years of picking programs, we kind of stuck with really standard rep, trying to grow our rep, while also kind of pushing the boundary with a few of the modern pieces we pick and getting commissions. And that allowed us to kind of see the range of like how the industry works. And we mostly focused in on making sure there was always a narrative in the like programs we're picking, and that like you could almost pitch it within like 2-3 sentences, and a presenter's going to want the modern piece no matter what, because it fits it so well. We have a program we're touring with this year with Kurtag 6 Moments Musico, Haydn the Bird, and Schubert G, and it's called Radiant Heights is the title of the program. And it like ties in everything. And like even when we're giving that concert, we always kind of frame the Kurtag in a way that the audience is actually experiencing it in a way that's more going to set them up for the Schubert. It's like opening their ears up. They have a little appetizer with the bird, and it's like looking at a Rothko when you actually get to that Kurtag. And it kind of like lets you understand like what the expression in music can be. It's avant-garde in its own way, and like how that narrative of Schubert kind of threw in like the kind of bird sounds and nature that you hear through the whole program is really highlighted, I think, makes the program need to exist as a whole. And it's been funny like seeing like how many times it's been actually subbed out. Because like it's so every time we play it, the audience like is like the Kurtag was the best thing. Like that was so great. I can't believe like I've never heard that composer before. But it's subbed out really often. We've played like a few concerts now that with the 59-1 Schubert on the same program. We've even done a couple with like Haydn the Bird, 59-1 and Schubert G major, which is like a huge concert for an audience.
Yeah.
It's like we love doing that kind of stuff. It's like the old school programming from back in the day, and that's kind of how we started out. And it's like it's interesting to see how creative you have to be to really push the edge. And the programs we have coming up for the coming years, because we program at least 2 years out, kind of have taken this into account. And we've been having to be more creative with how we fit things in, where a modern piece fits. How much can we actually fit in? How do you use commissions to help sell a program and kind of also tie in different things? And we even have a program in the future we're hoping like to actually have the meat and potatoes be like a modern work and like really get presenters to get behind it. And that's like a whole project in its own. And even when you consider like albums and whatnot, it's a whole undertaking. Like when you really think about how to sell it and get people to want to show up.
I think as we play more of these programs that we've sort of curated and like thought about the storyline of, I think as we've been able to play them, we're more able to understand too, like sort of the actual experience and through line of an entire work or entire program. And so I think each year our programming gets like a little better, having experienced like how much actually putting these pieces together, like that Haydn and Kurtag and Schubert program, like seeing what programming can do. Because I think a lot of the effects are almost things you would never even imagine, because you know that we put that together basically based on like, well, the 6 Moments Musico is based on Schubert, and like there's like a bird movement in that, and Schubert also has like a song called The Bird. Like it starts out with some like loose connections, and then you find out like actually like Haydn sets the stage for like this is String Quartet, and then you have this like palette cleansing or just kind of like very like smaller or not smaller, very different like sound world that you kind of enter, and it gets people listening in a completely different way, and then it actually gets people to hear Schubert G major and maybe in a way that they never would have imagined they would have.
Yeah.
And so that kind of like, I wouldn't say it's a side effect, but like that kind of like learning that kind of effect that you can have really changes how we think about programming.
Yeah, and just kind of tying it back to programming a little bit, because I understand Angela and Justin, you guys go back and forth between who plays first and second, right? So when you guys program, how do you guys decide who plays which part?
So Justin had mentioned like when we have the two main recitals, we have the enders. So based on our past repertoire, we just kind of go off. We actually have a rough draft of like how to divide up the Beethovens, for example, because it has a set number, and we wanted to divide up the middle, early, late in like equal-ish manner. So the next Beethoven, I'm gonna play with the 135, and then he's gonna play the Smetana, and then the rest just kind of fits in. This all started with like it's all like coincidental in a way. Like we started with Beethoven. He said 127 earlier, but we actually couldn't play that at school, so we played 59-2 instead. And they had asked me, which part do you want to play? And thinking that I was only going to be with these guys for like a semester, And knowing that they were all great musicians, I was like, I mean, why not play a Beethoven quartet on first? Because I had never played a Beethoven quartet before. Like, you know, with like three really good guys, and I just like learn how to play first violin. Why not? So I did that. And then the next piece, they were like, "Oh, how about Bartók 4?" And I really didn't know a lot about the Bartók quartets, and I was like, "Bartók 4, sure." And then I was like, "Justin, your turn." Like, you know, like it was so like so natural because like why, you know what I mean? Like we didn't sit down to be like, "All right, we're going to be a professional quartet, and this is our game plan." It was just kind of like we were exploring music. Who cares who plays what kind of thing. So a lot of our beginning thing kind of started that way. So then the next piece I took it, and then Justin took it, and then during the competition years, like we balanced out the rounds. So, you know, we would have one romantic pieces each, or like we would, if we have two pieces, we'd make sure both are presented, just things like that. And then now we have a pattern of like, you know, if there are two, like, if there's like a piano quintet that I played 5 years ago, let's say, or 10 years ago, then I'll just like pick that up or balance it out by program kind of thing. And sometimes it ends up being like one person plays the whole recital on first, and it like doesn't really matter. But yeah, we don't have like a really good system. We don't have like a system that's like all like structured out at all.
Right. No, but I mean, I just find that so curious because I mean, so much of the string quartet literature, especially early on with like, you know, the classical era and up until like the early Beethovens, the first violin really kind of took charge. So it's hard, I'm sure, to go from that to, you know, something else where, so it's good that you guys are balancing it out. So that must be good. Yeah.
Talk about like what affects the group. Like sounds like a whole thing.
Well, I will say that in a way, while we have very different personalities and it does affect the group, it's just because somebody's playing first violin doesn't mean that the group has any more or less say as a whole. Like everything is a real collaborative effort. The interpretations are always built on by the whole. So, and that's the reason why we say it doesn't matter, because it's not like the first violinist is going to have that much more say in the rehearsal process, no matter who it is. But there are differences that everybody's playing does kind of change based off of that. There's going to be inevitable, just like different vibes going on for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the main thing I'm thinking is like when we had done a couple competitions, I think when we showed up to Borciani in Italy, we were kind of treating the quartet as the switching didn't matter at all, and that we were the same group in both ways. And even like we had borrowed instruments from the ruining shop, and we hadn't even like taken into account like how they sound when they switch. We were just like, like we get to like go to this shop and like pick out some instruments that are like way better than what we have. Find something that's like, you know, like they were super generous, but like,
it's like steroids.
The problem was like we show up like the week or like I think it was, Borciani was weird because it was still the pandemic, so it was like the week we were leaving for Italy before the first round. They had to pick instruments to show up to the competition with, and like, I mean, for anyone, that's like we were playing on some nice stuff too on loan from our teachers, so we had it for a little bit longer, but that was like our first real experience, like figuring out like, oh my god, when you get these like super instruments next to each other and then they switch violins, how insane the changes in a quartet. And you start to really see like how personality and like who's playing what really matters. And by the time we did the Banff competition, we were like starting to think about that a little bit. We still went for comfort, and like we spent like 4 hours kind of like deciding like how we were going to take out instruments, if we were going to take them out, how much it was going to affect the group. If like I borrowed a viola or if he borrowed a cello, like is it worth it? Should we keep the same setup? Like how much is it going to change? And then once we kind of stopped doing competitions, we really went into like, well, when Angela's on first, we're a totally different group. When Justin's on first, we're a totally different group. And like that was actually figured out from just having played nicer instruments in many ways and getting feedback as a group. because like we still play on basically the same stuff we've played on since we started the group. Except I think Justin has a violin on loan for like another year, and like we basically figured out like you have to rehearse totally differently, and you have to listen totally differently. You play stylistically totally differently depending on who's on first, and it's like that took us like 5 years to figure out like how important that distinction was, especially with growth, like really understanding how to highlight a first violinist, let them be first voice, how to play inner voices was like a totally crazy thing. And like one big element, I mean, we started it before the pandemic a little bit, but we started doing Bach chorales like almost religiously. That's we started using the Bach chorales as like a tool to learn how to communicate and understand how voicing in the quartet actually works. And that, I mean, it's like we still spend like at least an hour a day doing them, and it's not for like to perform them, but it's like how are we gonna grow as a quartet? How do we get better at rehearsing, and how do we really listen in and understand our differences, like individually in the group and like when people are switched, like how that's affecting leading in like the most simple way. I don't know how you guys feel too. I mean, first is like pretty different. Yeah.
I think it's a different for me. It's a different kind of like it's like psychologically the most different. It's not more responsibility in any way because I could like quietly ruin a concert sitting second violin. You know, like I could just like without no one knowing, I could like
I would
do
know.
yeah. Except for my inner voice partner and Russell sitting next to me wondering
I would if she did it, I would think I did it.
Yeah, like you know, there's so many like it's like all psychological and like being first. Sometimes I could use it against me against the group in a way where I just do whatever I want because like I am the face of the music for most of the melodic parts. So I feel like I could be free and like yo you gotta catch me or you know. But at the end of the day, like the way we work, and it's kind of like if you had like a soccer field and you just like had like positions. I guess the violins are at a point where like we are having to switch positions and understand both roles very well for like, you know, to just to like win the game all the time. It doesn't matter. So it keeps us on like a more like physical kind of shape and like kind of that kind of thing, and then it keeps the lower voices in the shape of like understanding the field play like very much differently every time you get a different partner on whatever part you're playing. I think we just like that kind of if it's a challenge, if you want to say it's a challenge, it's a little bit of a challenge, but we like that kind of activity because the way we communicate within the group is so I think it's very thoughtful. It's not just like look at a part and you play the viola part and you're just playing the viola part. It's like I'm playing the viola part with Angela on first versus I'm playing the viola part with Justin on first. That makes you take care of the score a particular that kind of added activity and thought and the commitment actually makes us feel like, and we know that it does make the music come alive very much like the way we want to.
Right.
And there's really something to that. People underestimate how difficult playing second violin is because really you have to take so much into account to do it well. And that's what Angela's talking about, because no one will know that you are the person kind of, you know, making the group sound out of tune or unbalanced or affecting the way someone else is playing their solo. But that's your responsibility. And then the other thing that I think the biggest kind of change that I've had in developing both roles over the years is that it's very easy for me when I'm playing first to listen to myself too much and not listen to the rest of the group enough. And then vice versa, playing second violin, it's very easy to just listen to the rest of the group and not be aware of what's coming out of your instrument. And so like that's not always 100% true, but like that's definitely like the thing that to me is the most different about the way I see the challenges of it, having done the switching for a while.
One of the real like joys of being in a quartet for like a really, really long time, I think, is that like, you know, when you first start the group, there's sort of like roles that each instrument kind of steps into. Like the first violin, obviously, is the first violin. Second violin, viola is like the inner voice thing, and the you know what I mean. Like the cello is like playing this like kind of supporting like underneath kind of bass role, like of kind of just always. I always say in the coachings and stuff that I give that it's like a moving walkway, sort of like you're just like providing like ground or foundation. But I think like as we've been in the quartet longer and longer, I remember we had this coaching with Ian Swenson where he like talked a lot about how none of those roles really have to be fixed. So I think that having the switching violins and like being able to explore kind of more, I guess, fluidity in like the role that you provide in the quartet and being able to explore your own voice as like anything could be anything at any time, like kind of makes for a really fun, like creative space. Like I don't just have to be, in that coaching, he gave me a little thing, a whole speech about how like, oh, you're so strong. Look at you, you're holding down the floor. And like he's like, you know, as the cellist in a quartet, you don't always have to be the one providing stability. You don't always have to be the person grounding the thing. You actually can be like instigating some sort of chaos. You can be like kind of floating on the top. You can be anything you want to. And I think that was kind of really freeing in a lot of ways. And it's really fun getting to like explore all of that.
Yeah. And Ben, I really love that you guys or that you shared that you guys played Bach chorales. That's, I mean, you said you don't perform them, but I think you guys should do it as encores, honestly. I mean,
we did perform a chorale recently. We had a request to play this Schumann chorale that was for piano in the style of Bach, and it's a little less sophisticated, honestly, than the Bach. So I think it was harder to pull off for an audience than the Bach chorale would have been. But definitely, it's you have so many options in terms of what you could do with the chorales, and the way we've approached it is as the years have gone on, we've actually gone much more in the direction of always playing them very slow and non-vib, but then there's a million things you could work on even within those parameters. But in theory, a group could play them at many different tempos with and without vibrato, work on all of these kinds of things. But the reason that we have this kind of blank slate of that being the thing is that's the common denominator. And then every day you're sensing the difference of everybody when they walk into the room and first touch the instrument, you can sense kind of where everybody's at, and then work on a variety of things that are applicable to your pieces based off of that set of parameters.
Yeah.
One kind of silly thing is we play off the same set of chorales that we've been doing, which is we have like 24 chorales that were arranged for, I think, the American Viola Society, like a magazine article. And we have never actually found the article. We should like really look at that up, because like we've basically used it as like a space to kind of explore whatever we want, and like it really walks you through like in a very sophisticated way like how each chorale is a little bit different, and like it took us like a while of actually learning them to really see the differences and like read polyphony in a very specific way. But we really stuck with that because it was so easy to read and it was on IMSLP. And I didn't have to read like tenor clef or bass clef, and like it was like nice and simple. But I think there's like we're getting to the point now where it's like having more variety would be like nice, and we've like kind of started using the chorales very much so like not necessarily as etudes, but as like this kind of very free space to like try things out and really understand things in different ways. And that's been like immensely helpful to just like understanding each other, as I kind of was talking about before. I mean, if you look, the Cortara Rod have like the best kind of like plethora of it. They have like, I don't know, 30 or something already recorded up on YouTube. And like we play them about the same speed they do for most of them. And kind of we also play totally non-vib now. We started kind of, there's one recording of us on Instagram playing it like right before the pandemic. It was like the last thing we recorded. And we're like vibrating and like really playing crazy gesturally because it was just like fun. And I think the more we play them, the more we actually like find how to make them more singing, how to really connect like with what he's written and make that polyphony come across like in the most simple, like beautiful way. and like it's kind of crazy how simple you can make it and how clear, and it becomes pretty amazing how you can really hear voicing and start to like read voicing all four parts, because we all play off score for most of our pieces now. So it's like
Okay.
we're starting to be able to like totally read all four parts at the same time, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have anything.
Yeah. Just quickly moving on. So you guys are currently the Graduate Quartet in residence at the Jacobs School of Music in Indiana, at Indiana University, where you guys closely work with the renowned Pacifica Quartet. Can you talk a little bit about what this residency looks like and it entails, and also how the Pacifica Quartet has shaped your guys' work as a quartet in this short time?
So as the graduate quartet in residence, we have very few academic requirements, I guess. So we have a recital that we give every year, and we get this rehearsal space. We get a good stipend from the school, and we have a lot of resources. And we have been working with the Pacifica Quartet since, I mean, they saw us in 2019 when we were first starting off. So it was very meaningful to kind of come back after like really a wild journey of like doing all these other stuff and then like kind of coming back, working with them again. So while we're on tour, you know, we can't really play for them, but anytime we're back in Bloomington, we find time to play for any of them. They're very just, you know, easily just, we just kind of text them and say like, oh, are you in town? Are you in town? Because they're also busy touring. So anytime we play, you know, our private lessons or coachings, and they're very generous with their time. But I think one of the more unique things about this residency in particular, because we were also at the New England Conservatory for 3 years, graduated last year, is that they are like the leading quartet in America right now, just performing like a lot, putting out a lot of albums, doing a lot of special projects that really define them as like an entity. So we're not only learning about quartet playing and like learning about the pieces, it's a lot of like the business aspects of how to be a quartet in the 21st century, basically. Kind of learning their planning and organizational skills. It's just something else. Each of them kind of hold their roles, and they just kind of, you know, do their like jobs and emails and grant writing and planning, and they have this 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, that kind of thing. And as you can tell, we kind of started off as like 4 friends just goofing around, so like having to like implement more of the organizational skills as a business, that has been something that we felt the need to improve on, and felt the need to just be more specific about, just that entrepreneurial skills. Speaking of entrepreneurial skills, we also take a class with the OECD department at IU or at Jacobs, and we have a weekly meeting with Alan Barker, and he's been great in helping us like guide and plan our future together, basically. He asks us the right questions. So sometimes musicians, and we also procrastinate in the way of rehearsing. It's like you rehearse and you're having a great time, it's about the music, and you're like, oh wait, I need to like do that, I need to like write that email, I need to write that, I need to think about that project, plan ahead, because in 2-3 years we want to have albums that mean something to us, or in 2 to 3 years we want to make commissions with those specific people. And to make it come to life, no one's going to help you. It's just the 4 of us having to, you know, connect with the right people and have those ideas all planned out. So I think Pacifica, it's just they've been really inspiring in that way, because they're working nonstop and they're sounding top notch all the time. Like, you know, it's more than the performance sometimes, and it's all the other stuff that you do too. And it just makes us think about it, and think about it creatively, and trying to voice our artistic kind of identity outside of the concert hall as well.
I just wanted to say how great it is that IU has the OECD, and that it's such an extensive department, and that all students can really take advantage of that kind of resource in terms of one-on-one kind of, not counseling, but consulting, taking ideas, bouncing off ideas. And it's also great for us because it kind of works in consortium with our management, Concert Artists Guild. They're a wonderful nonprofit company that we've been really lucky to be on for 3 years now. And they also take great initiative to kind of push artists in the directions of being entrepreneurial, being forward thinking, and basically having your stuff together. So having those in conjunction has actually been really great, but it took us really getting on to management to even be exposed to a lot of those kinds of things. So I think it's important for more people in music school to be hearing those things in school. So there's a lot of kind of entrepreneurial programs now in different conservatories, but IU's definitely seems to be one of the most extensive. So people should really take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, we started at Rice. There was a program there that we weren't part of. The Callistos were there when we were just like regular students. We kind of got to see how they were embedded and allowed to rehearse. And when we went to NEC and got in, I think we kind of did the same thing that program would have allowed for, where we're just like allowed freedom to totally rehearse and kind of like go crazy asking faculty for any sort of coaching, any sort of information you could possibly want. And like, we weren't on management for our first full year there. So like that first full year, we were playing like 2-3 hour coachings, like 3 times a week at least. We were playing for a theory professor, John Heiss, who passed away a few years ago. And he was actually incredible to work with. And like the amount of people we got to like see at NEC was amazing, because that kind of really informed us with like a huge kind of like plethora of options and ideas of style and thoughts on music. And I think having that kind of play space as a quartet is so important when you're first starting out. And a place like Rice or NEC really allowed for that. And I use pretty similar, I think, no matter what group would come here, or what stage of your career, it'd be useful. But something that really makes it stand out is kind of like the Pacifica's ability to help you progress in your career. We're kind of thinking of this program as like, and they kind of asked us when we were coming, like, oh, like, can this program, we want it to be more for groups that are touring and like already have a career, so that we can really help them see the progress of like the 5 years from now. Whereas I feel like a lot of the programs are like, not just like, just stay together, just rehearse and figure it out. But that is kind of a lot of what the programs usually are. I think it's something that makes this specific program really special, is like the push to really become kind of more business oriented or better at those skills, so that you can have a lasting career and understand like what you need to be doing. But it's like, it's helpful for almost any student. I think like it's something that should be taught, and maybe it is. I mean, maybe it's just those things that you like never go to when you're a student, you know, all those like pizza like classes at lunch and stuff like that. So, like, really to like start to understand who you are and the projects you want to do, and like what is important to yourself and what you want to do for society, and like making sure what you're doing is something you love, especially if you're doing music. Like if you're gonna go get an orchestra job, make sure you don't hate playing an orchestra, or like don't get a quartet job if you like can't stand like sitting in a rehearsal or talking to people. It's like, or don't teach if like you really don't like teaching. I mean, it's like the basics. Like, I mean, it's crazy how many people don't think about that, because we surely didn't. I mean, before starting the quartet, I think we lucked out actually all being people that are like dying to do this and like really want to be in a quartet, and that's like, it's pretty lucky, honestly. And I think this program specifically is like pushed us to really define our projects and what's meaningful to us, and it's like a constant thing that we're like trying to make our business better and see 5 to 10 years out, and how we are going to get these projects done, how we're going to have enough money raised, or how do we get money. Like all of that was very important and built from this specific degree.
It's so funny. The Pacifica Quartet, I remember my first semester at IU, very early in the semester, I went to their concert, and I just remember thinking like, wow, I've never heard a quartet play like that, because it was just so riveting and so inspiring, but in so many different layers. Like, and I was lucky to have coachings with Austin and Simine, and Yeah, they're just such exceptional musicians and teachers, really, because they're just um, they're wonderful. But going back to your residency, so you guys obviously have coachings with them. Do you have individual lessons with members of quartet, and do you also have coachings with other faculty members outside of the Pacifica? Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, even with NEC, that was the case. We all had studied with various people there. But here we all study with each a member of the quartet. I think Angela studies with Simone, but hasn't quite had too many lessons with her. It's because it's kind of like we're at a point where it's like, do we have the time for a lesson? Have I prepared a solo piece that I want to play? But I mean, we all can ask for lessons. We all have like a weekly time scheduled, that kind of thing. And if we're in town, we pretty much show up and have a lesson, which is really nice because generally with where we're at in our career, it's just like, oh man, I've been having trouble on tour with this like one part. I don't understand what's going on. And then like you go in, they're like, why are you playing that at the tip? That's like really weird. And they're like, oh yeah, real basic technique problem, you know? But yeah, I think it's, aside from that, we play a lot for Atara Rod. We've messaged out. Kurt Muroki is also Alex Carr are people we've reached out to, and I think it's having those resources here and having so many people we can reach out to is nice. Our main problem is we're like not here consistently enough, but we're here actually quite often now, but we're here for such a short amount of time. We tend to like really gravitate towards the Pacificas or someone that's going to be kind of good for the piece we're working on or something we're interested in doing. Like we did a piano quintet and we had kind of reached out to try to do a clarinet quintet at one point. Ended up having a conflict with the concert and couldn't do it. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, and that also happened at NEC where like we ended up playing for like everyone on the faculty there and kind of like really abusing our time at that school. Like,
I was going to say in particular, it's really interesting playing for Atara Rod because he was a member of the Cleveland Quartet with our former mentors from NEC, Paul Katz, who runs the program wonderfully there, and Don Weilerstein, who Angela and I both studied with, and Martha Katz, who Ben studied with, was his predecessor in the quartet. And what's really interesting is we expected to come to IU and basically like get a reminder of some of the things that we had learned from the Cleveland Quartet, their kind of language of talking about music expressively and a little bit unconventionally, but really grounded in old school principles. But what we found was that Attar actually has pushed us probably more than any other coach we've ever had to think completely differently. And that's really been amazing, actually, to witness that. And even though, you know, he was in the quartet a long time ago, he still is so active as a soloist and chamber musician and is constantly pushing himself, even now, to evolve. And that's really inspiring to see people like that, too.
I think one thing that's particularly fun is that I think we all like have like random stuff kind of in common with each of the Pacifica members. So like there's like an amount of like coming back from being on tour and being like, you know, I keep doing this in concerts and like getting like sort of the feedback of like, oh yeah, I used to do that like 10 years ago when we were first doing tours. Like, here's how I fix this. And like being able to get that kind of advice from people that are like out in the field, like really doing it, as well as some of the people who like Attar or Paul Katz or like some of our faculty from NEC that like went through the entire career and like are sort of like at a different stage, I guess. Like being able to sort of put that kind of pedagogy together is like really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Well, just quickly talking about the Cleveland Quartet, because obviously NEC had Don Weilerstein and the Katzes, and you mentioned Attar, but at Rice, I think James Dunham was also a part of the quartet at one point. Did you guys get to work with him a little bit at all, or?
Yeah, he was our first coach.
Oh,
and
he was our first coach, and I grew up in Houston and studied with him when I was in high school. So he was kind of like a major inspiration and kind of like really took a lot of the steps to get us to where we are. I don't know if it was so much behind the scenes, but he was our main recommender for a long time. And like occasionally, like we'd mess something up, and he would be like, "You really should not do that. Like, you should really make sure to like turn your application in on time, like that kind of stuff, or like make sure you're writing your thank you emails, or like really being polite and reaching out to these people you want to play for, and all good stuff." But he like kind of taught us the fundamentals of just like not how you make it in the business, but like how to be a good musician and like the way towards society and each other. And he's very, I mean, he's like the nicest guy ever. And I think so many people respect him because of who he is and like what he's able to do for the industry. He kind of like has brought a lot of people together and like is largely responsible for, I think, some of the successes in these quartet programs too, because like almost all the quartets have kind of played for him at some point. And he's a great guy.
And since we're name dropping so many people, we also have to shout out to Norman Fisher, who was our other main coach at Rice. And Norman is just an amazing musical mind. He really encourages people to get into the music as if they were method actors. So that's one of the main kind of unique things about him. He also has a particular interest in singing. I don't know if he was a self-taught opera singer, but basically like he gets people to understand singing through the instrument in a completely different way. And he, stayed with the Juilliard Quartet members, so he's part of that legacy as well. So yeah, we've been very, very lucky and spoiled with so many amazing mentor figures. And we also should just talk extensively about Paul Katz, because he also created that program at Rice and at NEC to make and basically founded Chamber Music America, which is the main organization for chamber music. And Mr. Dunham was also very involved with that. So like all these people have just made a push to make chamber music relevant. And the reason we're able to have a career is because of people like that, who in the 70s and the 80s really put chamber music on the map like that, and quartet playing in particular.
It was like kind of like when we applied for NEC, like we never thought we'd get in. We have a whole story with when we applied for our first audition. Like we were like tuning backstage, or not even backstage. They had us like, they have you play in like the driest, like worst acoustic ever for that audition in this big rehearsal room. And they had us in like a carpeted jazz room warming up, and like we were tuning, and I like go to use Russell's tuner because we were like being really chaotic, and I didn't use my own, and he like slams his cello into my leg, moves his bridge over like multiple inches, and then Paul Katz walks in the room, and we all just act like, oh yeah, nothing's wrong, yeah, we're totally fine, and like a lot of our luck, the whole NEC audition was weird. But like before he tells the story, when we were like, we never thought we'd get in, so we spent like a whole night when we were in Boston while we were applying, like just listening to old Cleveland Quartet interviews, and they have like some of the funniest interviews of them on like the WQXR like website, and like you can go and you can find some of these old artists kind of doing
Young Artist Showcase.
Yeah, Young Artist Showcase. You can go find some of these like teachers we had, like just having a normal radio conversation when they're like in their like early 20s or like late 20s, like trying to figure out their career. And it's like funny to see how they talk and like what they talk about. I think their first interview, they're like, the guy asked them, oh, you guys like milk? Because they're like so young. And it's like really crazy to see like how like not put together a lot of these like teachers are, and like they're just having a good time, and it's like the principles they believe in and the things that made them successful or kind of come through. And that was like one of the things we did when we applied for NEC, was like we went through all of their like kind of archives and like really got to know some of these like teachers and what they believed in. You're gonna tell the story.
So we're in there, and I do the thing where I put the cello down like on its side, like to go to the bathroom or something, and I like I knock the bridge over like a couple inches. Honestly,
it was a lot.
It was far, and then we just stand there like looking at each other like oh my god, this is it. And then I don't think I tried to move it back even. I think I just left it, and I'm like, we're sitting there like, I think we were maybe playing a Bach chorale even or something, and I'm like, does it feel normal? And everybody's like, yeah, man, you sound the same. It's exactly the same. And like I'm like having to like move my left hand like over like a couple inches. And I remember what I really remember about that audition is like having to play like Bartok for the slow movement with the cello solo. And I just remember like just finding out where every note was. And there was kind of a learning lesson in this, which was like you have to be like just being demanding, like really demanding of the instrument of like what you actually want, because it wouldn't just like do the stuff that I wanted it to. So like there was kind of like a sense of like being so in charge and so like hyper aware of how I actually wanted the instrument to sound. And like you get there and you like find out, oh my God, I like really actually would love to be in this program. So like, I didn't know that until I was there. You know, you're sitting there like you'll do anything to get that sound out of the instrument. And I remember really learning that in that moment. And then, you know, we don't want to tell them, so we're just like acting like it's totally normal. And yeah, we made it through and we ended up at NEC.
Paul Katz had no idea. He was really impressed with the way Russell played it.
I guess maybe like one interesting thing is like we really thought, because we had like applied to that residency with like a year under our belts, and like we got into the Nielsen competition off of Facebook ad and applying late, and like really had like no business being there, and like we really thought we weren't going to get into any programs. So like when we got in, I think it really changed a lot of how we were thinking and like our priorities of like how possible it was. And each of us were in different places. Like Russell and I mean, we're like dying to play in chamber group. Like we're like at a school that's for orchestra, but like we're rehearsing like at least 4 hours a day in this quartet, like clearly not doing what we're supposed to be doing at the school. So like we're like, oh my God, we did it. We're gonna do a quartet. And, like Justin, I was doing a master's and I'm sure felt the same way, but Angela was like an undergrad and like I don't know, I'm sure she was just like, what the heck? Like, you know, like she was taking auditions too for like just masters. I don't know if you want to talk about it at all, but like there was like a sense of like it really changed it, like kind of like a switch turned, and we all like started understanding how possible it was. And the next couple of years even after that was like reflection on like, well, why the heck do we want to do this and why are we doing this? As the second we started playing concerts, it was like crazy because you had to have that so put together in your brain. As like the intensity of like performing and the anxiety it can give you is like, it actually is relatively not bothersome if you know why you're there and like you believe in what you're doing. And that it's a whole thing that kind of came out of like figuring out like, oh, this is really something we can do, and like really trying to make it work and like really going for it, because we all kind of had to give up pretty much anything else other than quartet at that point, which wasn't hard, I think, decision wise because of the pandemic, but then also it being the pandemic and there being no gigs was probably like a, you know, a whole other issue, especially for other quartets that had like concerts and not that you didn't have management yet, so it wasn't really a big bother.
Right. So I love just all that you guys shared about the group and, you know, your time together. Just quickly, can you guys talk individually about how being in such a distinguished string quartet for these last 6 years has helped you grow individually as a person and as a musician?
I guess, so for me, probably the biggest thing that has changed, I guess, I don't know. That's actually a really hard question to answer. You want to go first?
I can try. I think musically speaking, the way I listened is the thing that I could be the most specific about. Even as a consumer of recordings or performances, or when I attend performances, when I watch YouTube videos of, you know, old recordings or whatever, or like a new album that came out kind of thing, I listen very, very differently, or I have different modes of listening that I can be very like, you know, it's like, I guess if people are into like film, like some people might watch the same film like 15 times looking at every little prop detail, every little like eye movement detail, every little thing. I don't do that with film, but like I think that's like like metaphorically speaking in music. Sometimes I consume it like purely for enjoyment, and sometimes I consume it with like very detailed listening of understanding why this person chose what they did. Like wondering if I can like pick up a fingering or a bowing through just a recording. That's always fun. But I think before the quartet, I was just always consuming just purely by taste. So it's like either I like it or I don't. And there's no reason behind it. It's like I like it or I don't, which kind of built the way I played too. It's like either I'm happy with the way I'm playing or I'm not. And there's no reason behind how I feel and why I felt that way. And that's a crazy thing, but like I think I lived with that for a long time. Like you play a half an hour concerto and you're just gonna either like it or you like that's crazy. Like there's like a lot that goes into it. But I think like not that my standard was lower, it's just like I didn't know how to listen, I guess.
Yeah.
So even now I'm if I have time to practice some solo stuff, I'm approaching it in a very different way than when I did like when I played solo rep, like majority solo rep. And when I listen to like different quartets, on the surface they might have completely different tastes, and I might be like, that's just not how I would play Beethoven. But if I listen in a very specific way, and what I said about pair listening, it's like, oh, how is the viola and the violin communicating in this part? That's really interesting. When I listen to it this way, it makes sense, but when I listen to the other pair, it makes no sense. Like that kind of thing. And yeah, so I think that is like my biggest thing, like the listening and the layering of listening or things like that.
Yeah.
I think for me, I guess I grew up sort of in like competition culture and eventually doing orchestra auditions and stuff. And I think a lot of the time I spent playing was sort of spent like either looking for approval or trying to be right or like something like that. And I think what was really nice about the like getting to build a relationship and build trust with the quartet is like sort of discovering like all the things that like being like self-expression can mean and like all the things that like doing a thing together can mean and like really just getting to really just play for I get 3 people that just want me to sound like me all the time. I like they being in a quartet is like really being with like 3 teachers, but in a way like there's more encouragement to like actually just bring out the best in you and like really find your individual voice. So I feel like a lot of times people feel like maybe being in a quartet for a long time, you lose your individual voice, but I definitely feel like, at least the way that we work, like it's all about building that voice and like really finding security and comfort in yourself and like being able to share that completely openly with everybody.
I think kind of similar to both of the things they're saying. Just like, I think I started out being like a strong violist, if that makes any sense. Like, I played really loud. I played my solos like crazy, like in a good way. Like, I was having a really good time. And then, like, as we kind of went along, it's not like you sacrifice yourself in the group. But even as a group, we started to have to like really understand why we make the choices we make. And a large part of that actually was just like understanding how many different types of opinions there are. I mean, we've played for like every coach on the planet to almost like a detriment. And like, especially doing these competitions, I mean, if you go to Europe, like you're going to get totally different comments than if you're just like in Texas, like playing for the same 2 guys every week. And like that kind of like world change, like seeing what's possible and like seeing the different opinions people have on style, especially, is like so important to not like changing how you play, but how you think. And I think a lot of like it helped us like develop our own, like, I think at a certain point, like we all kind of like reduced ourselves musically to be a tighter group ensemble, play better in tune, play more like the same gestures, really get the characters together. And about like 4 years in, it really started to change back to almost how we started. We each started becoming more of individuals again, having our own voices to express. And like at the point we're at now, like 5, almost 6 years in, it's like we're really like developing our own language. We're starting to have a more distinct sound. We're making distinct choices. And it's not like because of what someone told us, but it's because of like how many things we've been exposed to. And like our playing is constantly evolving, like our styles are constantly evolving, and kind of each piece we play teaches us something new. And it's like it's kind of crazy, like going back, like Justin was talking about playing the Nielsen again. Like we play it actually pretty similarly to when we did Nielsen, but we have so much more depth and variety in what we have to offer and how impactful we can communicate a piece. So it was like crazy seeing like, oh my gosh, how did we even get through it? Because that piece was so hard. When we came back to it, we were like, we couldn't believe that we had learned that piece so fast, and like showed up to a competition and like didn't totally blow it. Like, you know, like it was like, it's a pretty incredible piece, but like, man, we had no idea. We were just having a good time back then. And I think it's kind of come full circle to where we're having a great time now, but like we have a better understanding and grasp of like what is possible and how to talk to each other. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
I have so many things to add. I mean, like Russell and I always talk about how we were only children, and we secretly wanted siblings. But there's an element for me. I think there was also an element of like just learning what family and friends truly means with that kind of vulnerability. Really, that was very life-changing for me as a person, and it continues to push me in a direction of being a better person every day. I've started telling people sometimes I feel like a string quartet is more of a self-improvement cult than a touring arts ensemble. Or at least in our case, that's sometimes what it feels like, and in the best possible way. And it really feels like we also talk about like finding meaning in the adventure of it and the journey, but not just in the sense of doing the task, but really stretching yourself. And I think that accountability and that need to constantly stretch yourself, that was probably the main difference of when the quartet got serious. Is it's like having a family now. It's like it's not all about you. Like I always told myself, well, I'll give music my best shot, but I don't know if I'll be able to have a career in this. So I was trying very hard, but like I never actually. But then now it's like, well, three people's livelihood and mental health and all of this stuff largely depends on me at any given moment, and that's terrifying, but also so inspiring at the same time. And then that resilience to. This is more about like the touring aspect of it, like being able to get off a plane and play your best and not make excuses out of it, or same thing in competitions, really trying to make it the most inspiring thing that you can and not look back with any mistakes or whatever, and just take it as a learning experience, and then taking comments. So like that's the thing Ben was referring to. People say all of this stuff that sometimes seems contradictory, and then you realize, wow, it's literally kind of all true. And sometimes it takes years to put it together and make sense. Also, particularly, I studied with Don Weilerstein like 10 years ago in my undergrad now. And a lot of the things he told me back then, like, didn't make sense to me until being in a quartet. And like, he was a quartet violinist, like, of course, like it would make more sense in hindsight. But it's like those kinds of things of like putting together all that that unique blend that becomes you, like everyone's saying. It's like you do become more of an individual, ironically, as a result of learning about what it means to be in a group.
Yeah, and you guys all shared such wonderful things. And just quickly, Angela, I'm so glad that you brought up listening, because I think in a world today where everything is so hyperactive and everyone's moving at 100 miles per hour, I feel like listening has sort of become a lost art in some ways, just as human to humans. And I remember my first semester at CIM for my master's, I studied with Melissa Kraut. And our very first studio class, she had us like sit in a class. We were all in a classroom together, like a group of 20 of us. And she just had us sit in silence for like 2 minutes straight. And it was so awkward. And at a certain point, you could like hear the person next to you's heartbeat almost. But that exercise was to show that like we really need to be aware and really listening to everything around us. And I think that applies especially obviously in chamber music, but I think it really applies to any endeavor that you do within the field of music, whether you're teaching or whether you're an orchestra, even soloists, a lot of soloists that I've talked to, they talk about the importance of listening. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Yeah.
It's like we use every day.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because you called it the art of listening, which I really like. I mean, it happens every day in rehearsal. Like, I mean, I hear you, but it seems like you're not really listening to me, as in, like, are you really grasping my opinion or like how I'm feeling and things like that, right? Or like the way we're playing, we're so used to each other's sounds that like I can just sit there and play, and like run through a section and have like not picked up on anything or have nothing to talk about, for example, because I wasn't listening in the way that is going to grow myself or the group or our ideas or our music. So that's listening is something that we really, really think about a lot. And I think the closer you get to somebody, like you take it for granted and, that kind of thing is always, so it's like a daily practice for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been so wonderful, and I'm so grateful for your generosity in time, because I know you guys are super busy and in demand. Quickly before we close, can you guys share any words of wisdom to the audience, especially the younger ones that might be listening that are trying to cultivate their own passions for music?
Sure. I mean, well, I think first of all, we've been around for 6 years and people think that's a really long time, and we sometimes feel like it's a really long time. But I think one of the things that I really like to emphasize is it's our journey as well. So, everything we do is not correct, and everything we do, it's not the answer. We're still learning and we're still figuring stuff out. So I think it's always good. Like we have the Pacifica Quartet. I think it's always good to look up to somebody with the curiosity to see how they live their lives too. So if you're ever following a career, I would be really interested in how you view our growth as well. So if you're ever wanting to be in a quartet or be in music or do anything, I would say, just to continue our previous conversation, listening and communication is the main thing. And not, just to sit there and be like, I'm communicating with you or I'm listening to you, just, not just the pure action of it, but learning to understand each other as human beings is it takes a lot of effort and energy. It's not easy. It's not going to be comfortable. But I think it's to be able to say, you know what, I don't like that. And to be able to take in somebody else saying, you know what, I don't like that. And saying something very honest and sometimes negative, and being comfortable in discovering how to, guide each other through, something else, something more positive, maybe. I think that's just always key. And every dynamic is different. So some people I think you kind of figured it out. We love to talk about these things. So we would sit there we sit there over pizza and wings, just talking about this. Sometimes our rehearsals turn into this because this is so important. Even before you pick up the instrument is how we feel, because there's nothing that you're going to get done if you're just playing through your Beethoven quartet, totally blocked off from each other psychologically. So I would say work on your communication as a individual. Listen to yourself, learn how to be more aware of your choices and your reasons behind why you do stuff. Sometimes make uncomfortable choices. And always have fun, as Russell says.
I think maybe my main advice would be literally try every opinion that someone has. Don't dismiss something just because it doesn't line up with what you're hearing or what you believe in. A lot of times some of the best things we've come up with for phrasing or dynamics or how to blend something or even figuring out basic intonation has all come from trying some of the silliest ideas or things that we thought were incredibly unhelpful. And I mean maybe it goes back to our mentorship, but I don't know if you ever have a lesson with Don Weilerstein, you'll end up trying stuff that you might think is absolutely crazy. I mean, for us, we never when we met Don, we had already been trying all that stuff to some extent, and it was kind of fun to see how far he actually would push the envelope with things we had never thought of. But like there's an extent of like really try to understand what everyone is actually feeling or what they're hearing inside of their head. And it goes back to that listening. Like if you really tried all the ideas, you're going to be a healthier quartet. You're also going to grow as a musician, even if that group doesn't make it. Like you're going to be better with the next group you go into with ideas and understanding what you want.
I mean, like Angela said, like I think it's really important, like never to like forget to have fun together. I think that kind of stuff, like that's also like sort of like the meat and potatoes of like how you actually can have real conversation about like very seriously about anything interpretive or like anything in the music. Like having that ability to like, you know, after rehearsal, like we're gonna go get a beer or something, or like, you know, having fun, even having fun exploring the music together. I remember a lot of the people when we were first like starting out would always say take care of each other, and I that meant really different things to me over the years. Because like, you know, when somebody tells you that and it's your first year, it's like, yeah, okay, we'll take care of each other. And then like, you know, you go through like everybody's ups and downs in their lives, and like, you know, you see so many, you know, it's like any kind of long friendship or any kind of long relationship, you really end up like being there for every moment, like seeing every side of a person and like learning to empathize with those people and like understand where they're at, and like, you know, just like you do in the music, like just always bringing out the best in people and like always understanding like why they are feeling the way they're feeling.
Do you have anything, Justin?
I think, yeah, being open-minded is really important. That's kind of like the biggest one to me. And yeah, staying humble, but also just exploring, having the audacity to explore things yourself is always really important. And then, you know, just stick to what's really important to you, and that means something different to everybody. But yeah, in the long term, that's what it's really about, I think, in building any kind of career. And then, you know, and then we're lucky that we're this group of friends who we know we're friends, and we know that we're beyond friends at this point in a lot of ways. And well, not in the wrong way, family, not like that. But you know, just knowing where you're at and like where your priorities lie. And I think we're all lucky that we found that together.
Night in Siena.
Night in Siena. ...
Well, this has been great. Just such wonderful time of laughter and just insight. Thank you guys again so much for your time, and you guys have had such a wonderful trajectory so far, and I know that's just going to continue going forward, and I wish you guys nothing but just joy and continued growth as a group. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Hang out like in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Indiana or somewhere.